Welcome everyone, bienvenue. My name is Zabe Sheikh. I'm Canada's Consul General for Los Angeles, Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada, and I'll be your moderator and host for today with my great panelists, Kirsten Stewart and Pierre-Louis Ferron. Before we begin, I've got some serious business to talk about, a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that the Canadian Consulate General of Canada in Los Angeles is on the traditional grounds of the Tongva people. That the Tongva people have been caretakers of this land for generations before us, and we thank them. As I said, I'm Zabe Sheikh. I'm your host, I'm your moderator. These are my great panelists that we're going to be talking to, and we're talking today connecting Hollywood North, top media and entertainment trends around content delivery. Before we begin, I just want to say that if you have any questions after our discussion, or as you discover them through our discussion, please feel free to type them into the question field throughout the roundtable, and we'll do our best. We've got people behind the scenes doing their best to get through as many as possible in the allotted time. But I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you, Kirsten, with you, Pierre-Louis. We're gonna get everyone to introduce themselves a little bit and what they do, where they're coming from, why they're the experts in this discussion. But for now, I'm gonna give you a little bit about the intro and expansion into what the Canadian Consulate General in Los Angeles does. But we also, more importantly, in many cases, help sell Canada and Canadian companies into the territory and help Americans invest back into Canada. And of course, we help celebrate Canada, culture, brand, value, entertainment, and media, which is what this discussion is about. Canada, of course, has one of the most innovative, talented creative communities, ecosystems, and of course, a cost-effective business system. So whether you're looking for best-selling video games or the Hollywood blockbusters, chances are there's Canadian expertise, Canadian content, Canadian talent behind all of that. Canada's a recognized global leader in video game production, VFX, animation, and Canada's an obvious choice for investors looking to grow their entertainment and media business. Couple of facts about Canada. It's the third most filmed in location in the world after the US and UK. And in 2018, film and television contributed 12.8 billion to Canada's GDP and supported nearly 181,000 jobs. Now, Canada's digital media studios provide visual effects and animation for Hollywood blockbusters and Academy Award nominated and winning films, multimedia technologies that major studios rely on for their films, like Maya, Houdini, and Harmony, were developed in Canada. I'm sure you've heard of all of those. Canada is also the third largest video game development production hub in the world. And in 2019, video game production contributed $4.5 billion to Canada's GDP and supported over 48,000 jobs spread across 692 gaming studios. That's a pretty good statistic, I'd say. How do we all fit into this? The Canadian Consulate, as I said, we help Canadian companies grow into the territory, but we also help Canadians and American production companies behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, stay connected. Whoever's keen to produce north of the US border into Canada, we help you get set up, whether you're looking for ways to find tax incentives, whether you're looking ways to find infrastructure support, or whether you're looking for your team members to just get your passports in order and get them back up and across the borders. We help that all happen. So that's a little bit about us, but I'm going to pass it now over to our panelists, Kirsten Stewart, who is Chief Revenue Officer at PEX, and Pierre-Louis Ferron, VP Product at Lumen and CEO and co-founder at Steamroot. Kirsten, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know why we're talking to you about top media and entertainment trends around content delivery.
Thank you, Zabe. Yes, I'm Kirsten Stewart. I'm presently the Chief Revenue Officer at PEX, and that's a new position that I've just taken on in the last few weeks. PEX is a content identification technology that's actually helping content creators globally understand where their content is being consumed, and it's a vital part in making sure that the revenue model is complete when it comes to content creation, identification, and making sure that people get paid for what the work that they do. So obviously content creation is hugely important to me. I've come from a long career at the intersection of media and technology. I have been working at, for example, Twitter. I was the head of North American media out of the New York office. After that, I was at the World Economic Forum, where I headed up the media, entertainment, and sport vertical, where we worked together with major companies, multinationals that have influence worldwide, like Facebook and Google and Tencent and ByteDance, all out of the kind of platform publishers, again, content creation world. And prior to that, all of that, my connection back to Canada is I was once the head of the CBC. So home of shows like Little Mosque on the Prairie and Schitt's Creek. You know, these CBC has been, I think, globally known for its news and its entertainment and sports coverage. And I was very pleased and proud to be a part of that team for a few years back a few years ago prior to joining Twitter. So very much a big believer in the opportunities out of Canada, big believer in the benefits of the partnership between Canada and the US, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Kirsten. Looking forward to discussing with you. Over to Pierre-Louis Theron, our next panelist, VP Product at Lumen and CEO and co-founder at Steamroot. Pierre-Louis.
Thank you. Like I said, I'm VP Product at Lumen. For those who don't know, Lumen, we are a North American and global technology company, Fortune 500, that's been providing a global network for many use cases. And one of the big focus area for our company is media and entertainment, working with a lot of studios, production company, as well as OTT platform. And the product I am in charge of is everything regarding the delivery of the contents, the CDN side of things, as well as the media workflow. So if you want to move video around, if you're an OTT platform and you want to distribute content to the user, there's a good chance that some of this content is actually going through our network as we speak. Prior to that, I co-founded a company that actually was acquired by Lumen, and we were very focused on the OTT delivery, and we had developed a pretty nice peer-to-peer CDN technology that's been leveraged for large live sports events, as well as large-scale VOD and on-demand consumption. So looking forward to the discussion, especially as we are in an industry that's been moving quite rapidly over the past few years.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pierre-Louis. And I'm going to start with you, in fact. You talked about OTT, the content, the delivery system over the past 12 months, of course, with the pandemic, keeping people in and keeping people out of all the arenas they might want to be, but in the arena of the home, or in the arena of the screen-based, or in the arena of the delivery system to their eyes. What have you seen is transforming on a global scale thanks to a surge in OTT demand? And in your opinion, if you can also, how's the rise of OTT shaping the future of the sector?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, really the past 12 to 18 months has been, I see as an accelerator. The trend was already there. Everything was already ongoing, but it's been a huge boost to all this trend and acceleration. And the market had to adapt fairly quickly to it. If you look at, I mean, so many platforms has been launched over the past 12 months. Disney Plus, HBO Go, Peacock, Discovery Plus, all the main traditional broadcasters kind of moving around, changing their approach to really push OTT. And if you look at the adoption, Netflix, it took them almost like 10 years to get about 200 million subscribers. Disney did almost half of that. I think they're around 100 million subscribers with Disney Plus in 18 months. And it's really, again, showing that people are ready to consume content over the top. People are really willing to watch this content online. And if you combine these huge broadcasting changes in North America with all the new players, Christine mentioned ByteDance and TikTok. We've seen the traffic of this platform literally exploding, and people consuming a different way of content, which is short form, which is very easy and quick to consume, and generated by a lot of, everyone is a content creator in this platform. It's not only the studios, like you and I can be a content creator, and not only the big blockbuster from the Hollywood studio. So Very, very interesting trend, accelerating a lot. Also, the live events, I think we're still in a question mark here, right? Because last year was a disaster. All the sports has been canceled. We see that coming back fairly rapidly this year. But obviously, I mean, not everywhere the stadium are full because of the constraints. So I think we're still kind of expecting to see how that's going to evolve. That being said, we also see a huge fight in that arena. Amazon on the top of the list that's been spending a lot of money to be seen as the global live provider for sports events. Thursday night football in North America, a lot of content sports abroad in Europe, in Japan, in every region of the world. So there's also in this area a huge fight. But yeah, really with COVID, VOD really like kind of been a blast of the adoption in the market. It's been really impressive.
Absolutely. What's great about what you talked about where the content business is headed and where it's come from, it reminds me, I'm looking at my face here and I see that white of the beard. I'm from back in the day, in front of and behind the scenes, when things were a little more traditional in terms of content delivery and what it meant to be a content creator. Again, whether you were fully the creation of the whether it was a production or a story or a film, or whether you were literally part of the crew and how you were in that content delivery community and what that meant and how the business really revolved around you or how you revolved around the business. Kirsten, I want to ask you, you mentioned your growth from being the head of a public broadcaster into the tech space and now really into the new world of where tech is taking content. Why do you think Canada is so popular with North America or globally, frankly, in terms of its content creation, in terms of its talent at home and abroad?
And thanks, Zabe. And I think Pierre-Louis really kicked it off well, giving a sense of context of how much things really accelerated through the pandemic. You know, these were trends I think that had been established before. People were moving towards different forms of content, different forms of different ways of consuming that content. But absolutely, the pandemic and forcing people into their homes and lockdown, as you mentioned off the top, really changed the way people consume content and also changed the way they create it. Because I think that the sales of ring lights, I think at home, are a good indication of how many people jumped into the content creation business. And Canada, particularly, with its size, with its kind of predisposition to being a collaborative country, because of its size, it's known always that it needs to partner globally. It's tended to create deep forms of training for its talent, based a lot, rooted in a lot of the kind of Canadian content requirements that were put in the past. All of that kind of helped the country develop a huge talent base, and it's incredibly diverse. And I think the connectivity that Canadians have globally, our understanding of the world, enables us it lends us very naturally to partnerships. It lends us to being able to learn a lot about the world around us. When you see partners like Netflix, for example, invest so much into Canada, it's because they understand there is a deep talent base, and that deep talent base being diverse means that there's so much that they can do. So it's really been interesting to see how never before has there been so much a demand for content through this pandemic, but never before has there been so much restriction and challenge to creating that content. But Canada actually did come out of the pandemic and is coming through the pandemic, I think, with a new understanding of its own talent base and how it can actually partner globally and expand on that. I think it has a long history of being a great place for international production, and I think it has learned through this time to even expand on that and to grow its professionalism and the way that it can be a partner on the world stage.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kirsten. That's true. You mentioned the diversity of the talent base. It's really key, that idea of what a diverse talent base means, but also the ability to have a diverse workforce in front of and behind the scenes, as you said, a real talent of folks that not only create, but help create. Those talented crews that put up those productions, the talented VFX people that really accelerate where gaming, filmmaking is going now. And then when you think of the companies, the platforms that exist, small and large outside of Canada, that are really enabling here in LA and around the world, people to connect, people to be able to create content in real time collaboratively is real special. Coming back to you, Pierre-Louis, can you talk about, again, I'm going to kind of sort of help you and help us drill down a little bit more into the OTT space. How is it changing workflows in the media and entertainment space? What's it doing to the game, and how's it changing it?
Yeah, I mean, the big change is that suddenly all these audience and people that were consuming traditionally TV on either like satellite or cable are moving fairly rapidly to online consumption, which means that it has a huge impact on, first, the way you want to deliver the content. And not only we're changing people that are watching on TV, but like the theater now don't have the exclusivity on getting the release. And I think this is also something that's been pretty unique, and that nobody would expect it would arrive so fast. And it's because of the pandemic. And you've seen platform like a major studio like Disney and HBO that's simultaneously release on their OTT platform as well as the theater. And just a week ago, Disney released Black Widow online, and they made almost as much revenue online that what they made on the theater for the first week. So which is just amazing. So you have this huge amount of people, millions and millions of people, that's going to have to consume video online. And the internet infrastructure has to change dramatically over the past 20 years to sustain such a huge amount of traffic with such a high quality as well. Because when you're consuming online, I mean, remember, only 15 years ago, watching a video online, you weren't expecting such a good quality. It was like, you had some buffering, the pixel, it was like pixelized. Now you expect to have 4K on your TV, even on your phone, on your tablet. So the industry has to change dramatically, has a huge impact on the content delivery space, which is the piece that we are spending a lot of time on, which is how you connect the platform with the users and are able to scale at that millions of concurrent users by distributing the content, caching the content as close as possible to the end user, so you can have all these users experiencing a really, really good experience. So it's really a challenge around scaling, cost, and quality. It's like, how do you manage to change this workflow around these three problems? How do you make sure that you not only rely on one vendor as well, because we've seen that it's really hard to operate such a big network at scale. So usually you want to rely on multiple vendors, multiple architecture. Redundancy is key, because when you're releasing like a prime time VOD, or when you have like a live events like the Olympics, you better be sure that you're going to be backlashed on Twitter or on all the social media if there's anything happening to your platform because you're not able to handle the scale, or before the performance is bad, or because the latency is really bad. So that's really one big aspect of it, a huge transformation. We've seen in our network, the traffic like multiplying by a huge number over only 2 years. Like it's literally, and we have to keep up with that pace. The other part is on the production side. Like, how do you produce that content? And now, how do you do that remotely first? Because everyone is at home. So you have to do a lot of remote production for both live and on demand. You have to run some of that in different architecture, in the cloud, at the edge, or in your device at home. And the network and the connectivity between all these areas needs to be really scaled up. And how do you send that not only to the theater, but also to all the OTT platform at the same time, make sure that it's secure, make sure that it's not released before. It's completely new world. Like, a lot of these workflow are changing, both on the production and preparation of the content, as well as how you deliver to the end user.
Thanks for that, Pierre-Louis, and I'll be bringing someone else into this discussion in the mix pretty soon, based on what you just said. But You spoke a little bit about social media. You talked again about what COVID, the pandemic, has done to content consumption, content creation, and distribution. For you, Kirsten.
Well, I think, if you use COVID as a point in time in which was really a forcing factor, Louis talked about it well around, how much it has changed the way that we distribute content and the way that we can produce it because it has to suddenly be remote. I think the wonderful thing about Canada is it is, by nature, a country that is very geographically dispersed. This really kind of challenged Canadians to pull on their skills and in being, able to work outside of what are normally traditionally, big centers. And I think, Canadians are very much built for that. So we're used to, when I was at the CBC, I was reminded daily that we were responsible for an audience that was coast to coast to coast. There were 3 coastlines. It was a huge, geographic coverage. So I think, Canadians, again, by nature, have an understanding of what it's like, to be working in a distributed environment. It also understands, how to create and pivot quite quickly. Like, I think the flexibility of Canadians and understanding how to be both connected to the global marketplace, but also react to it and maybe anticipate it a bit. It's, I think, not lost on anyone that something like Schitt's Creek, a Canadian comedy production, swept the Emmy Awards last year in the middle of a pandemic. The ability for Canadians to tell stories that resonate globally is only more important at a time when people feel disconnected, they cannot travel. There is this need to hear from others, and I think Canadians also understand that global narrative and can speak to it quite well. So. Whether it's the kind of traditional media space, whether it's storytelling, whether it's the role that it can play in gaming, and the great way that is always on the forefront of technology. I think the one thing Canada has also been doing in recent years, and again accelerated through the pandemic, was understand its very important role in technology overall, and how much the deep talent base there is responsible for creating a lot of the amazing technology, and whether it's contributing to it on a collaborative basis globally, or whether it's launching great companies like Shopify that enable others to do business. Canada really is a hub for great technology, and is always looking to be on the forefront, punching way above its weight. So things like the pandemic and the past year and a half that we all went through, I think, have only focused on the unique abilities that Canada has because of its size, because of its collaborative nature, because of its international scope and understanding of its place in the global marketplace. It's really kind of deepened its need to pull on those talents and hone them even more. So whether it's in gaming or whether it's in storytelling, media, any kind of coverage, it really has understood that it has a unique position, and it really should be doubling down and focusing on developing those even more. And I think that's where it's been landing in the global marketplace.
Love it. That idea of doubling down and really understanding its own technology, but also where the technological breakthroughs are happening and how to really unite countries, storytellers, and the audience, I think is a great point, and also helps make it a great segue for me, because I'd like to actually introduce someone into this conversation. And hopefully we can have an even more engaging discussion around technology, platforms, and the unity and alignment between countries such as Canada and the US in terms of how we create it and how we distribute it around the world. I want to introduce Robin Constantine. He's just joined us on screen here, the Senior Vice President and Head of Global Sales at BCE Global, a Bell Canada company. And Robin, we're talking with Pierre-Louis and Kirsten about content delivery across Canada, including content creation and the distribution. So I'd love to get a sense from you in terms of, how really on the ground does a company like BCE Global help move content and help studios connect between Canada and the US, now that Lumen, as Pierre-Louis talked about, is also part of the picture. Maybe both of you can give us a little.
For sure. So thanks for the intro. First of all, from a Bell BC perspective, we fully understand the importance of that industry. Bell being a vertically integrated company, being a media company itself, and as well being able to have tons of fiber and as well wireless access, understand how you have to move the data around from the end user to the content creator. So Zabe, to answer your question in terms of how we, for example, how we integrate ourselves with Lumen. So obviously with Lumen, as Lumen's customers, that they're being either creators of the content and or as well hosters of the content in Canada, we interconnect ourselves with Lumen across at least 3 points of interest within the United States and within Canada. So literally from the West Coast to the East Coast. And that interconnection of those network, or what we sometimes call the peering of these networks, is really critical to provide what is needed for the content creators, and as well how we distribute this content across. So, from a customer that has created content, it's based out of New York, and needs to be distributed across the platforms into Canada. Obviously, we will transport with Lumen's help the content to Canada, but with Bell's overall reach in terms of eyeballs being both on wireless and wireline, and I'd probably say one of the biggest eyeball provider, I guess, of all the content, we are able to give that information back to all these end users rapidly, and as well with the least latency that's required. And that's an important piece, especially if you're looking at streaming video and or even gaming. So the importance of how we interconnect ourselves with our partner, such as Lumen, is critical. And we really see ourselves as the bridge, right? That bridge to be able to enable that content crisscrossing from the US into Canada, from Canada to the US, but more importantly, to the Kristen's point about coast to coast to coast. That's what we do day in, day out because of the reach of our network.
Yeah, and I like to complement that. I mean, of course, the Bell being such a big network and Lumen being one of the biggest, if not the biggest backbone network in the world, it's very important for us to have the right connectivity with all the networks that have huge highball connection. And when we are moving content from the platform to the end user, this interconnection is really key. And this is why we've been working on increasing and making sure that we have redundancy and reliability, like I was saying earlier, with Bell, with multiple points where we can connect. I think especially because there's this new usage around the producing content between Hollywood, like Montreal, New York, like Paris, whatever. Now you're getting into architecture where you have multiple companies. You might be running some of this workflow on the cloud, on AWS, Azure, Google. You might be running some of these workflow on the edge platform that might sit on Lumen or on their network. And you might be running some of these workflow at home in your computer that is powerful. And if you want to work in a remote environment efficiently and go fast, where the connectivity and the integration of these multiple vendors has to be ready to it's a completely new workflow. So this is why we're really working a lot with company like Bell and especially in Canada is producing so much content. It makes a lot of sense for us that are working a lot with some of the American studios, a lot with some of these Canadian studios. We kind of make the bridge to move this content around when you're preparing it, which is really a good use case of what the Lumen Edge platform and Bell interconnection can be together.
I was
Thanks,
going to
say, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to add to Pierre-Louis' point in regards to how important that is, how we all work together as an industry. The Lumen example is a perfect one, right? As we transport this content north of the border, for example, and sometimes hosted on some of those big cloud companies that are residing within country. When that content resides within the cloud, we further enhance that by giving, for example, either post or pre-production capabilities by bringing, for example, these companies to go into the cloud at the best way possible, again, through our network. So the possibility of moving rapidly this content in truthfully securely as well, which is another piece that we need to keep in mind, is how securely this content can be secured within the means of our network is critical on a going forward basis as well.
Yes, so it's important that we insist on security. I think in that it's probably one of the biggest challenges as well for all networking company and technology company over the next 5 years. The increase of all the attacks at the different layer, at the application layer, at the networking layer, like all the different layers, it has been increasing dramatically. And at Lumen, we've been developing additional products, obviously with securing our network, but we're also offering our customers to secure their own network when they are, because we're moving the content around, and so we increase the risk, obviously, right? When you run workflow at different layers and you're moving content between different architecture, where you increase the chance to give openings for some people that would like to attack, more than where if you were just running and editing everything on site, on premise, on your own data center with people on site that have like a private VPN access to that. Well, now you have, again, one person in Canada, one person in the United States, one person in Europe or New Zealand that would have access to this content in potentially 3 or 4 different platforms. So insisting on security, making sure that people are educated about how secure needs to be your network, how secure needs to be your infrastructure is really important, and it's really a big area of investment on the CDN front as well.
And it's something I love to hear about, because as someone who's very aware of the value of content, and I think, globally we've learned through the pandemic how important content is in our lives, information, how it is literally a vital resource. You're actually providing a pipeline. You're carrying precious cargo, essentially, because never before has there been such a value for content, and what you're carrying is no longer something that is a nice to have. It's very much a vital and important part of people's daily lives, of global economies. It's been interesting to see the shift and the understanding now of how important content and content distribution is. So, I'd love to hear about tools like this that, empower the consumer, empower the creators, and everyone who's kind of in that value chain and the supply chain of content as it moves from creator to consumer. It's amazing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Like, content is king, right? Is a platform. I mean, the technology is the foundation, and you need to have the best technology possible. And we've seen many of these platforms winning because they have the best technology. I mean, Netflix is a technology company. Google, obviously, all these media platforms are also becoming technology companies. But if you don't have the right content, you're never going to win. And the reason why these platforms are winning is whether they are providing the best content to their users. So we know that we are an enabler, and that's the king. At the end of the day, the user is going to decide whether or not they're going to subscribe or buy a film or use this or the other platform because of the content, and they expect that the technology will be at the right level. Now it's just a default expectation. It's not like a few years ago, if you had the YouTube was like the #1 for a long time because it was the only platform. You were going there, you hit the play, you were starting right away. Now you expect that is going to be the case for every single platform you're going to. You have to have that, otherwise you're not even considered by the user.
Absolutely. I think it's, you folks are talking about the security, activity, the real value add that content creators are looking for, whether they're big production houses and studios, or whether they're folks like me sitting at home or sitting in the office trying to broadcast this panel and make sure that the world gets to see it. This is all really important. I think what's fascinating from my point of view, as we represent Canada and really talking about Canada's value add to the global content consumption, content creation, and content delivery ecosystems is when you look at things like Disney Plus's Mandalorian, whether you look at Netflix's Ginny and Georgia, or The Queen's Gambit, or whether you look at artists on Spotify, such as Drake, Shawn Mendes, Justin Bieber. These are all moments and evidences of where Canada really fits into the piece, because the VFX all supplied for The Mandalorian happen out of BC and Quebec and Ontario. So does the production for Queen's Gambit. And then when you think about, well, you mentioned Pierre-Louis, YouTube, you know, Justin Bieber really took off of YouTube. Shawn Mendes was a Vine star, really. And now when you think about Spotify, where the music game is going, really someone like Drake is exploding and creating and setting and breaking records all over the place on that platform. And so whether it's the diversity of Canadians in terms of really the talent in front of the scenes, or whether it's the diversity of possibilities that Canada has to offer from an ecosystem, it really kind of combines to help the world not only create entertainment and media, but also consume it, enjoy it, and actually have a lot of value to it. And that's what's really exciting about where Canada, for me at least, fits into this game. And folks like you three help lead that charge from a real important standpoint, because of course the talent is there and the production houses are there, but without connectors like you spreading that gospel, making sure people know what's happening, things don't get done. So just a quick question to you again, Kirsten, and then we'll move back to Pierre-Louis and Robin. How is the intensity around Canada really, how are you seeing that intensity around Canada either spread or cross-pollinate?
Well, I think, you know, as we talked about off the top, the benefits of Canada is that it has always understood how to react quickly. And sometimes it puts itself in a great position of being able to predict when things are going to be changing and moving. And I think the investments that Canada as an infrastructure have made in its culture, in its technology, you know, has always made it ready and prepared for moves and changes like this. So yeah, absolutely, the demand is incredibly high. Studios are completely booked out, sold out for years to come. You know that from your business in the past. The demand is incredibly high. I think Canada works to reach that demand, and I think the demand only creates more opportunity and more kind of pathways for Canada to actually even deepen and broaden its own experience and talent base at the same time. So it's, you know, it is a challenge, I think, for, you know, Canada, given its size, to meet the demand. But I think it's a much better place to be in demand than to be in the opposite situation. So I think, you know, whether it's, you know, the partnerships that it does with the OTT channels globally, with the technology companies, and the way that it's actually being able to create its own IP and its own system of support and creation, it's been quite astounding. And I think, you know, Canada will continue to meet demand, and I think enjoys the pressure of it.
I was going to say something around that part, because you're right. I mean, I see through just the lenses of our company in regards to the amount of just sheer volume of content being distributed across our platforms, but as well through the other lens in regards to where the production's being done and the spirit of partnership that you were alluding to before. The idea is that there's an ecosystem that's been created within the Canadian space as well, right? So studios are producing some great content. There's the virtual effects that are coming in, bridging themselves into it, and distributing this across either sometimes a province or provinces to distribute the work around is what I've seen as some of the key to your points, Zabin, around just the sheer amount of work that's being done within Canada. The key here is how you distribute this across the sheer geography of, again, going back to the coast to coast to coast. How do you do that? And that's where we partner as well from a company perspective with a lot of our customers to do exactly that, right? How do we move that content to the cloud so somebody else can take it and finish that product? Same thing, we'll do the same thing across the border with Lumens, where we'll move the traffic across, again, in the spirit of partnership, because I don't think in any industry that one can do it alone, and therefore hence why the partnerships are critical in how we succeed as a country, as a company, as partners.
Robin, what are the, you know, you mentioned security, of course, clearly we mentioned that. What are some of the top qualities production studios are looking for or should look for when working with a network partner? You mentioned partnerships.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've seen, and I don't think it's particular just to the media and entertainment area, but it's as well as how that content is being stored. Where is it being stored? How is it being distributed? Does it go across what geographies? So in certain industries, maybe not as prevalent in the media and entertainment industry, but is where the content resides and where it's transported. Meaning there's some verticals that they are not seeking that the content goes in any other jurisdictions. For example, in the United States, they wanted to keep all of this content within the Canadian space. So the way we engineer some of our content and as well how we distribute some of the content is around their network. So therefore, if there's a specific need around where the content now resides and where it needs to be distributed, we make sure that the content will stay, in this case, for example, within the Canadian borders, right? And when it's needed, it will be brought down to the United States. So that is something that's coming out more and more around how content is stored and actually distributed within from one coast to the other coast as well. So we do a lot of that.
I mean, I was saying like it's definitely localization of the content is a key piece, and we see that in more and more geography, but also, and sometimes even more importantly, is how do you keep the data? And we talked about security, but the privacy concerns are rising across the globe. We've seen the regulators being more involved in that area in different. I mean, Europe started with the GDPR laws, and now it's kind of spreading a little bit across the globe. And we see that as network providers, the data that we collect or that we use to just operate our systems, we need to be very careful about it and be sure that we are moving the content properly, but we also are either not storing the content, or when we're storing it, we keep it in like the right geography. And this is where we need help as well, and interconnection between networks to be sure that we're doing the proper things. And this has been really like one of the topics we worked a lot on the CDN front as well, because we operate a lot of logs of what people are consuming, which is a data that the regulator want to make sure that nobody can have access to, or if people have access to, it's well regulated and well organized. So that I think this is something as well that all the networking company and the platforms will have to be more and more serious about.
And something that we saw both at the forum and something that PEX is trying to address right now is the pandemic, I think, did put a little bit of a pause on some of the regulation activity around, Article 17 and Section 230 around some of the data kind of privacy issues that people have been really focused on prior to the pandemic being the distraction for a lot of, and being where governments needed to focus their efforts, obviously. But as people start to emerge from it, and we start to see what happened with this huge influx of data and information and content moving around the world, as Pierre-Louis pointed out, I think the regulators will again kind of reawaken to the need to really start clamping down. And so data effects and data privacy, they're going to be at the forefront of a lot of governments' minds. As Pierre-Louis said, GDPR started out of Europe between Article 17 and some of the other things we're seeing out of Australia. It's definitely going to be a focus for a lot of regulators. So companies will need to understand and work with other companies that do appreciate the importance of data security.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, a key aspect of the conversation in a way that it just really wasn't before. I keep referencing my time in the industry, and it was so led really by companies and large groups, as opposed to right down to the single content generator or the content consumer. And so that relationship definitely requires a lot more privacy, a lot more security, and then of course a real understanding and awareness and identification possibility of really who owns the rights and what's happening when that content is being disseminated. And how it's being used, because now we can cut and flip content in a blink of an eye, of course. I'm seeing some questions just pop up. A couple of my last question, and then I'll end up with a real big one at the end of it. But before I go to the audience questions, just if you folks can give me a couple of examples of challenges or success stories that when you think about the organizations and service provider partners, challenges they're facing or success stories you've seen as they try to navigate this very complex environment. That'd be great to share, I think, for the audience to hear a couple of either challenges that were overcome or success stories that just took it to a new level.
I could kick it off just by one that comes to mind, and it's funny enough, we're talking about the pandemic and so forth, but I think Pierre-Louis said it well before, everything got accelerated. So whatever we were doing, but it was at a slower pace. When the pandemic kicked, it just everything got in overdrive. So I want to give maybe an example of something prior the pandemic where we were seeing some processes being accelerated. So gaming companies. We've talked about Canada being home to many studios, gaming studios across our country. Again, the idea of partnering with gaming studios, of getting the games to those consumers as close as possible to those consumers is key, right? So for that end user, basically to be seamless for them. So we worked with many gaming studios in Canada, but as well within the United States, at bringing the content as close as possible to those eyeballs that I talked about in my intro. And this was at the pre-pandemic was a challenge, because obviously we needed to do a lot of caching, putting into closer to the edge and so forth. Again, for that whole seamless experience for the end user. So I would say in the pandemic and post-pandemic, this just basically ballooned. And now we're seeing more and more demand in regards to either peering, in regards to caching, into our network, so that we can basically give that whole, that whole seamless experience to that end user, to be not only good for the end user, but as well for the game developer, which that game developer needs to bring that content as close as possible. And without the help, for example, of companies like Lumen and Bell, in this case, it's almost impossible. So again, the partnership between the players is critical, and also understanding where the industries is evolving to is also critical for the success of all this ecosystem.
I think sports too is probably another good example. We talked off the top about how everyone had to be, suddenly, in arena sports was not a possibility, at least not with an audience, and at first not at all. And one of our partners, when I was working at the Forum, the NBA, I think, was kind of, to me anyway, a best in class example of trying to create an experience where, the NBA has always said that 95% of its fans will never see an in-stadium game. And so, already you've got a predisposition to your fans being at home and enjoying it, on television or through other means and streaming. The challenge, though, is what is that experience like when you don't have an in-arena audience? And so what they did, through technologies like Microsoft Teams and other kind of ways, was to be able to actually create that environment. And they did it quite quickly, and to be able to go through, the finishing out that particular season and getting all the way to an NBA final and creating the environment that it did, I think it did kind of set the bar for a number of other sports teams and leagues globally in terms of how they were going to be approaching, quite a devastating change in the way that they were presenting, their sports. And so it was interesting to see how quickly, a league and a team could pivot in a time of, they're having to worry about their own teams, having to worry about the health of their own staff. People are having to work from home. They have a whole raft of things that they had to deal with. And then in order to create an environment that felt as seamless as possible and brought in the audience into the arena, even though they physically couldn't be there, I think they did a great job of that.
Yeah, one point on my side, all of these are really good points. I need to find others. But I think what's really amazes me, since I started in the industry about like 8 or 9 years ago, it's been the scaling. And we're only talking about 8 years. How this whole OTT, especially regarding the OTT and the online consumption of content, keep on scaling. And again, huge boost last year. And to be honest, everybody was underwater. Like when everyone stayed at home in the entire globe and now consuming their content online more and more, like there's been some nights where everybody was like sweating, like, what is it? Are we gonna break the internet or not? Like there's been a few moments like that. And I'm still amazed through obviously increasing of capacity, additional networking, peering, software now plays a key role as well. It's like we optimize the way we are doing things. It's not only pipes, but it's like how we put more and more intelligence in that networks to make it happen. With some of the technology, like, I don't know, more deeper caching, peer-to-peer technology. There's many like multi-CDN solutions as well. And that's really what amazed me, is like how we keep on scaling, and we're still at the beginning of that trend, right? We still have 1 or 2 generations that had never consumed content outside of OTT. And when this whole change is going to happen, it's going to be another 10 or 20 years. We still have a massive challenge of scaling in front of us. So this is what is very exciting for me in that industry.
You are, all three of you are so good at this. You know your business, and you know the business so well that the folks behind the scenes are letting me know that either you've answered folks, everyone who's has asked a question, either you've directly answered it or you've touched on their questions, which is doesn't always happen. And I've moderated a few panels in my time, so good on you to everyone. So I have one final question. I'll leave it for each of you to answer, please, and then we'll do a great little wrap up. But look, you're experts, we've talked about it. You've really given some amazing examples. What does the future of the media and entertainment sector look like over the next 5, 10 years, maybe, from your perspective about from where you sit in the industry right now? I'm gonna start it with Kirsten. She used to be the head of shaping the future of media, entertainment, and sport at the World Economic Forum. So this future question naturally goes to you first, Kirsten.
Thank you. Oh no, just put me on the spot there. Yes, I think, if everyone had a crystal ball that could predict the future, we would all be in different positions, I think, right now. But I think the one thing that I'm most excited about, and the trend that you can tell is impacting so many different areas that we've covered today, is the fact that technology is really putting power into the hands of the user, the consumer, the creator. And I think in any way that we are making more seamless the opportunity for people to create, to access, to distribute content is, that I think has only been accelerated and will only accelerate more. And I think, some of the things that I'm seeing, like recently, people in the last few months, I have been seeing a few forms of technology which will actually create the opportunity to be an OTT player in your own home. So the idea being that if you are someone who have your own IP, you have your own rights content, and you want to be able to use kind of a white label technology to be able to be your own Netflix and pick which countries you have rights for, and figure out a way to monetize that through a payment system that's also included in this technology, then you too, you don't just need the ring light and a YouTube channel or a Twitch feed. You can actually create your own OTT system, which I find fascinating, because I think a lot of people who have somehow felt disintermediated or maybe not connected, or just maybe want to take a little bit control back from some of the big streaming platforms and say, what, I'm the rights holder, I want to go directly to the consumer, to my audience. I think you're going to take advantage of technology like this. So I think that's only going to put more pressure on systems like those that our friends here are developing, but I think that's a good thing. The more power and the more technologies in the hands of people, I think these things can come out to some amazing results.
Curly, you talked about your decade in the business and where you've seen it come. What's the next decade holding?
Well, as you understood, I'm super excited about OTT, but I'm going to be talking a bit about gaming as well, because it's amazing to see the size of this market now. It's bigger than the entire entertainment industry, which is like around video or streaming or studio. So it's just incredible. And I think, I don't really know what's the future, but it's something I'm excited about, is because we haven't seen who's going to win is the switch between gaming from the cloud or gaming from your own device. And this, we're right in the middle of this trend where you actually have a whole bunch of people who have gaming consoles, that have phones that are actually gaming consoles as well, with a lot of power. And you have on the other hand a lot of big providers, and most like cloud providers, that are becoming a big player in that field by providing processes that are running on the cloud. So the gaming consoles is in the cloud, is in the network, and you have access to that with just a screen. So I think this part is going to be interesting. Who's going to win? Is it going to be the next generation of the consoles, or is it going to be the cloud providers with the huge horsepower they have in their backend system? I can't wait to see who's winning. And in both sides, Lumen and Bell needs to play a huge role, because in both sides you need to move a lot of content, or you need to move a lot of process between the user and the backend infrastructure. So I'm really excited to see who's gonna win and what's coming next there.
You're putting me in a tough position, because now
That's
everybody
great. Last word to you, Robin.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're putting me in an awkward position because everybody answered a couple of great points. But I would say, I don't know the future, but there's a couple of things that are going to be in terms of trends, right? That it be gaming or it be studios and so forth. I believe the idea of distributed teams, how you collaborate, as if you're in the same room or in a different country, will continue. So, whoever creates it, reviews it, approves the content, that's going to continue and at an accelerated pace. I think powerful, scalable networks are critical, right? So therefore, to be able to support this, so that's going to be very much in place. So anything that says, from especially like anything around virtual, visual effects and so forth are going to be critical in how that gets moved around as well. And we touched about it, network security, right? More than ever, I think is going to be critical as you distribute load across networks, across the cloud, is important. So that's whatever the future holds. I think these are three anchors that will be there for sure to be able to enable whatever that future is going to be. So that would be my prediction. Maybe we talk about it in 5 years. Let me know how I did.
Well, thanks. So let's all talk about it in 5 years again. As I was going to say, Robin mentioned how we're all in different rooms across both sides of the border. So thanks for joining me, Kirsten, Pierre-Louis, and Robin, and to all our attendees, wherever you're joining us from, is in technology. Great that we're able to do this. And thank you, BCE Global USA, for hosting this great discussion. I invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn to continue the conversation. Of course, as a Canadian representative, we're very proud of what Canada has to offer on the global stage. And we at the Canadian Consulate here in LA are definitely here to help that connectivity grow for you, whether you're looking to create a company, whether you're looking to create content, or whether you're looking for where the best content comes from, because it comes from Canada and Canadians. Keep an eye out for the registration link for the next virtual roundtable. I've been your moderator, Zabe Sheikh, Canada's Consul General in LA, Arizona, and Nevada. This has been Kirsten Stewart, Pierre-Louis Theron, and Robin Constantine. Have a great day. Be safe, be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.